Hey, just another Caterpillar video. This one's mainly dealing with the lifting bracket I made for the 2H series Caterpillar RD6 and D6 starting engines. It helps greatly in the removal and installation steps when you're working on these things. I did the first one with no bracket. I just tried to use some straps and lifting chains with some eyelets, and had quite a time. So I decided as long as I had that first starting engine off, I'd just go ahead and make a bracket that would fit it a little better and help me achieve the proper balance points, so that I was fighting with it a lot less, taking it off and putting it on. And this video is not so much about the design of the bracket, but just kind of showing where a good balance point is on these starting engines for fore and aft leveling, as well as how they sit in relation to the diesel engine block. They don't actually bolt straight vertical on those engines. The mounting pad has the top canted inward just a bit. So where this bracket attaches to this engine assembly, it keeps it pretty closely lined up with the mounting pad on that diesel engine block. And you can just kind of see reference about where the balance point is. The center hole where the lifting clevis is now is kind of the 0 point. Keeps everything in balance on this setup. Now I drilled some extra holes in the top bar on each side, and that's just kind of to take into account perhaps maybe the different angles that the tractor may be sitting on, if you find it necessary to take the starting engine off, or the extra holes to the rear of the clevis there would hopefully account for a D7 or D8 starting engine assembly that has the high-low range transmission mounted in conjunction with the starting pinion clutch. That would add quite a bit more weight back there, so hopefully those two holes would be sufficient enough to level those assemblies out if I ever get the chance to see if this bracket would fit those engines, which I suspect it probably would. And I still do have room enough back here to drill one more hole anyway, in case I needed it. But so yeah, it's kind of simple. I attached the rear adapter piece to the bolt holes for that water block off plate that's back there, and you can see the plate actually has a bump out in it, so I couldn't just sandwich that adapter piece flat to that plate. So I could have made a couple of round spacers, turn them out on the lathe to go to the inside of this adapter piece and tack weld them on, and that way I could just get by with using just two plain bolts. But for all intents and purposes, it was just a lot quicker to just put a nut on each side of a extra long 3/8 bolt, and when I assemble this piece to the engine, I just have the nuts and the bracket run all the way out toward the head of the bolt, and I will run the bolts in pretty much until they bottom out in those bores. The next step, I'll take the inner nut and run it down until it sandwiches or tightens up against that block off plate. Then I'll just take the outer nut and run those down in, and that tightens the whole adapter piece onto the bolt. They act like jam nuts basically, and spacers. So kind of some monkey motion involved in that, but I use this so seldom that it was just a lot quicker just to use bolts to accomplish that task rather than making it any more complicated than what it was. And the front adapter piece, there's actually two styles of cylinder head on these RD6 and D6 starting engines. This happens to be the earlier style cylinder head, and you know that because the hole for the water outlet pipe is more toward the center of the cylinder head. When I first built this bracket, it was to suit a later style starting engine that had the water outlet right underneath where this front adapter piece is right now. And the original adapter piece I had looked like this, and it went right in place of where this one is right here. And the through holes in it are quite a bit smaller than the ones in this piece, because the way that water outlet pipe attaches to the cylinder head here, there are no studs that stick up. It just had two 7/16 bolts that passed down through the pipe, went through the cylinder head, and threaded into the block. So these smaller holes work nicely for that. Once I got into this this earlier style starting engine, the bolt pattern was still the same. It slid over the studs that stuck up here and here. But as you can see, with that adapter on there, not much of the stud would stick up above the thickness of the angle iron. I could only get about 1 to 1.5 threads worth of bite with the nut, so that just wasn't enough. So I ended up taking some round stock, turned out some custom nuts for this application on the lathe. That way I could still use the rest of my lifting bracket. I just had to redo how I attached this front adapter. And the main portion is a larger OD. It's got a shoulder on it. The smaller diameter portion is meant to stick down through the hole, the larger hole in this bracket. And I threaded the inside for 7/16 by 20 thread pitch, which happens to be the thread pitch of the studs that stick up above the cylinder head on this. And that way I can just run these down. I can engage all of the threaded portion of the stud that sticks up above the cylinder head, and I cut off a couple of really short bolts and just put some Loctite on them, snugged them down inside the nut bodies there, and so far that's held up fine. They're pretty much just for a little bit extra tightening down or loosening force if you need to do that, but so far they've done the job. If they ever come loose, I'll probably just snug them in again and just put a little bit of tack weld on there to hold them in, but so far they're working well. And sometime after I built this bracket, a gentleman actually put some plans on the internet that I found of some blueprints that Caterpillar made, kind of suggesting what their version of a lifting bracket for these engines would be. And it utilizes the stud holes on the front of the engine block where the manifold would bolt on, and it pretty much just consists of a fabricated plate with kind of an arm that sticks up and tilts in a little bit, and there's a round, like a ring lifting eye that's put on top of that. But it all works pretty much the same. That would be a lot simpler in the assembly to the engine, but this has been working for me, so pretty happy with it. But like I say, this video was not so much about the design of the bracket as just kind of showing where the balance points are for this engine, and just kind of how I accomplished that task. So hopefully it might save somebody a little bit of trial and error if they're thinking of making their own bracket one of these days. Took me a couple hours of fiddling around just to kind of get all the angles right, get it to hang right. So it really just made the whole removal and installation process a lot easier. So, one thing I just about forgot to add. It just so happened to work out that the flat lifting bar at the top stuck out just far enough to clear the intake manifold of the diesel engine that would run right through here. I still have about a 1/4 inch gap between my clevis pin and the intake manifold. So it all fits in there really well, and there's really not a lot of unnecessary disassembly that has to be done on the diesel engine to make this work. So pretty straightforward. So that's about it. Thanks for watching.